The first roughly hour of our time together was talking about NFC and how the momentum of the technology is increasing, and how there's some exciting new use cases and specifications and changes to our certification program that we wanted to share with the community. But the next two large topic areas is we're going to talk about how NFC is being used and being implemented in certain markets. And the next presentation is an encore, I guess, Bruno, that would be a good way to say it, an encore presentation of a talk that was given around smart packaging. Bruno, you're going to MC us for this next period of the session, so I'll go off video and turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. So indeed, as Mike said, this was a virtual conference organized by AIPIA, and that is the association behind smart packaging. And the goal of this webinar is to explain why we believe NFC is really powering up smart packaging, and the way we like to present it, it's that NFC are the waves behind smart packaging. Next slide, please. So today we'll be presenting with a number of industry experts and specialists who will all be giving their view, their insights in the use of NFC in smart packaging. So I'll be joined by Alistair from Pragmatic, Amir from SmartTrack, David from Blue Byte, and Mike from TapWow. So looking forward to have a very interactive and interesting panel on smart packaging. Next slide, please. But before diving into the use cases, so of course, as has already been demonstrated today, is that NFC is a technology which is standard-based, and so it enables to connect devices with each other. When we say standard-based, it means that those standards need to be set, and that's actually the role of the NFC Forum, which joins over 120 member organizations who are all committed to make the use of NFC widespread and to really make this the technology of choice for smart packaging. Again, Tagawa-san earlier today already shared a number of benefits that NFC technology can provide. Just maybe to repeat some of them that are particularly relevant to smart packaging, is that first of all, NFC technology is very intuitive. So actually, the only thing it takes is one tap in order to establish this communication between devices. And when I say communication, I actually mean a two-way conversation that is established, because that is what NFC is doing. It's a mutual exchange of data. So it's not one way from one powered device to a passive device. It really establishes a conversation that the data can then be exchanged in two ways. And this sets it apart from other technologies such as QRC. A third, also very important, maybe something that is gaining importance in the years to come, is that there needs to be an intent to establish a communication between two devices. So the two devices need to be brought together in physical proximity in order to establish the communication. This also means that from the moment you take the two devices apart, that all communication will stop. So everything remains under control of the user. And then finally, and then again, this is the benefit which is driven forward by NFC Forum, is that NFC is an interoperable technology. So you have all these hundreds and millions of mobile handsets, contactless cards, readers that are deployed worldwide. And the great thing is that all of them can speak between each other. Next slide, please. So now that's technology. Now, what can we do with it? And actually, it just takes a look around you in your everyday life to see how NFC can change the way you work, the way you live, the way you play. One of the most prevalent use cases that always come up and what people are maybe the most familiar with are payments. Actually, that's why my organization, MasterCard, is part of the NFC Forum. But it really doesn't stop there. Everywhere you look, you can see and you can imagine use cases for NFC technology, whether you want to take a train or a bus, whether you're producing items, whether you're at home and you're communicating between all the different appliances and devices in your home, whether you want to access your office, whether you're taking your car and you want to interact with all the different systems inside your car, or whether you're a digital marketer and you really want to deploy some high-end, very advanced types of one-to-one marketing. So all of these use cases can be powered by NFC, and of course it all rests on the fact that today, or actually by 2030, there will be 125 billion devices that support NFC. And actually today what we're going to do is we're going to take a deep dive in a number of use cases of NFC technology, and I'll be shared today with a number of specialists. So I propose we go to the next slide, and I will hand over the floor to Amir, who will start with sharing his expertise and his insights.
Thank you, Bruno. And as Bruno mentioned in the introductions, my name is Amir Kashniati. I head up the NFC business at SmartTrack, which is now an Avery Dennison company. And very quickly, I'm going to give you an overview here on the application methods behind NFC, and we'll go into some use cases here with some of the partners that we work with. And just kind of stepping into it, NFC in general has many different form factors and shapes and sizes, and as a result of it, we've developed many different SKUs that have applications that have to do with embedding. They many times complement labels, and then in many situations they also become durables, and they become embedded as a bill of material in the front of the supply chain and then placed into a product. What we've outlined here in some of these icons is really some of the high-level use cases that we've seen prominently in packaging, and then also in the durable world. Really, we see that many times when that tag is taken as a bill of material, the first use case is really around authentication. And then once you authenticate and truly validate that product, it really opens up a flurry of use cases behind it, whether it's actually walking you into digital experiences or interactions. And then it basically correlates into many analytics. And then from those analytics, you can get insights that feed into your CRM. You can start to give scores behind the use cases and the interactions. And then as a result, you can set triggers which open up the door to much more content and then much more consumer loyalty. And then over a period of time, what you see is an increased loyalty to the brand itself and a decreased cost of sales, because you start to track the interactions with the products. You start to see what consumers are interested in versus what they're not interested in. And you can actually tie that back into many other analytical points that the marketing teams have. What we've also seen in many of our early stage engagements is that the NFC tags in the supply chain start to act as a level of factory control within the manufacturing plants. So if you have a SKU of products, let's say the run is supposed to have 10,000 products. If we deliver 10,000 tags, whether or not there's an overrun, we start to understand if there is an overrun that there won't be a one-to-one tag assigned. So it starts to provide a level of factory control. And then as soon as those products are ready and they're basically out the manufacturing door to a DC and then eventually a shop floor, you start to have checks and balances around item traceability as well. And if you follow me down to that last line where it starts with Adidas on the left side with the phone interacting with the ball, that's just one of many use cases we've had in the durable market. So we actually took a tag, embedded it into the soccer ball, and then the experiences start to kind of roll forward from there. So with that, I'll pass it over to David Rogers, from Blue Byte, who partnered up with this engagement with us, and he can walk you through some of the use cases we've done together. David?
Great. Thanks, Amir, for that. And as Amir said, I'm David Rogers. I'm from Blue Byte, and what we do is kind of work on the consumer experience side of NFC. So everything that Amir just talked about, we're working to empower brands to build those actual dynamic digital experiences that consumers interact with when they tap the NFC tag, usually either in products or packaging. So we're really working to kind of create a world where any product, any package, really any physical thing can be connected. It can be a connected product. So you know, the great thing about it is you're kind of inherently creating a smart product when you attach NFC to a product or packaging. You kind of transform that thing into a digital platform. So you know, when consumers tap the NFC tags installed on these products, they launch that digital experience on their phone. Obviously something that they have with them all the time. And that creates a new direct channel for brands to communicate, as Bruno said, with a one-to-one two-way street, to use too many numbers there. But so one of the things that I wanted to look at specifically here was one of the specific use cases that can be used on this consumer side, which is, and it was mentioned before, but which is that product authentication. So when consumers are able to verify that the products they are considering purchasing is authentic, that's when they have that peace of mind of knowing that the product is authentic and that the product is safe. And additionally, when counterfeits are easily identified by this process, by using the NFC technology, that means that the brands themselves are protected from fake or unsafe products being out there in the world and damaging their reputations. So as an even more specific example, if you see on the bottom right of the slide, there's a brand called Tonic that we've worked with. And they're a CBD brand that embedded NFC tags into the packaging of their CBD oil. And what they did was they incentivized consumers to tap the tag by providing that product authentication feature in the digital experience that the consumer launches when the tap is done. And additionally, to kind of back that up, consumers within that dynamic digital experience have access to a third-party lab report that shows them the exact ingredients of the specific item that they tap. And that's one of the great perks of NFC, is that it can be product specific. It can be item specific on that level. And in that way, the brand is able to inherently provide a personalized experience. Here they're using the authentication as a way to incentivize that, to give that consumer the peace of mind. And then they can also use that experience once they have that to go beyond that to the other use cases that you can do, the other features that you can build into these. And I think that's one of the great advantages of using NFC. And in here, I want to turn it over to Michael to talk about a few more of these use cases that can happen after that verification.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening. Anyway, I'm Michael Schur, CEO of TapWow, and we're a software company that's built a platform that brings NFC to life, both on the supply chain side and on the consumer engagement side. And we've also got a number of pre-built experiences that could be assigned to NFC tags to get people going very, very quickly. I wanted to talk a little bit about the magic to start, and then I'll get into a use case around that magic. So one of the pieces of magic, other than the touchless or the frictionless experience we have today with NFC, which is just incredible, is around relevancy. So when a consumer has your product in their hand at a point of a decision, relevancy is really high. And due to this relevancy, that's when the conversion happens. David is absolutely correct in there's an incentive or reason why somebody chooses to tap on an NFC tag. If that hook is strong enough and relevancy is high, you can get some incredible conversion. The second piece that's incredibly important as you interact is a value to organization is the data. It really is in and about the data. If you want to personalize a journey for a particular consumer to build brand loyalty or have a visibility to certain odysseys that are happening in your supply chain, it's really around collecting and understanding that data. Now, with all of that, the use cases really are infinite. That's good news and bad news. But let me give you sort of an example of some of this. One piece is that around the use cases not only happen at the point of sale, but also continue to happen that journey in an offline to online way. I have a physical object and I have the ability to tap on it. We see a lot of that happening at home. So here in this particular use case, a cosmetic brand has developed the ability to scan somebody's face. If I can scan your face, I can build an oil profile. So what I do is I walk up to a counter in a department store, I take my phone, and I tap on a NFC tag on the counter, I register. So here I'm opting in. I'm giving my demographic information associated with the device ID, the time and location that is captured at that point of me tapping on an NFC tag. So now they scan my face and they associate my data that I opted in with the oil profile of my skin. Now I walk around the store and I simply take my phone and I tap around and it says, hey, this product is not good for my skin. Here's a recommendation of the product you should use. Oh, I go around to another one, tap. Oh, yes, that's the right one for me. So really some ability in store to upsell and cross-sell and make sure you have a really great user experience. But that journey doesn't end in the store. When I take that product back home and I do a tap on it, what I do is take the time and location. I know your profile and what products you've gotten from us, and I look up the weather, and now I'm able to give you a detailed tip for today saying, hey, we're experiencing high UV in Denver, Colorado, and here's our recommendation for the day. So there's a customer journey, and again, that is collecting a lot of really valuable information and providing a personalized experience. So I'd like to now turn it over to Alistair to go deeper.
Hi, everyone. Thanks to the NFC Forum for this opportunity to present to you. I'm Alistair Hanlon from Pragmatic. And, you know, along with the rest of the speakers, we're super excited about the potential for NFC. And what we're doing at Pragmatic is we're solving one of the challenges that the industry's had for quite a while. One of the big limitations on the use of NFC today has been high cost, or relatively high cost, of the NFC tags. And Pragmatic is a semiconductor chip manufacturer. We can manufacture all sorts of chips, and we do it with a new, unique platform which doesn't use silicon. So this is one of our wafers. This is a thin, flexible wafer which has thousands of individual chips on it. Now, the benefits of our technology are twofold. One is the form factor. So when you put some of these chips onto objects, sometimes packaging, it's better to be thin and flexible and to go through packaging manufacturing lines, for example. But the main benefit when we're talking about NFC is the cost reduction that we can offer. So our chips and the eventual tags that you can make with our chips are significantly lower cost than the existing silicon-based solutions. So Pragmatic has been working closely within the NFC Forum to have our chips and our technology become more widespread. So we're working with the RFID inlay manufacturers to do that. So here's an example of one of the tags that's been made there, and you can see, hopefully you can see there's a small chip on the bottom of there. And what that means is that our technology can be used for lots of different applications. So I'm just trying to move this slide forward. We go to the next slide, please. So lots of different applications. So put it into everyday objects. So it's no longer the preserve of relatively expensive things like items of clothing or footballs and those kind of things, or high-end spirits and drinks. Really, we see a market where there's a role for both the silicon with the more sophisticated technology and a lower cost solution, which is based on our flexible chips, our flex ICs, which is suitable for very high volume, low complexity kind of products. So we've seen projects, for example, in FMCG type applications with soft drinks, and also in medical applications where the items are being tagged and used within, you know, a couple of hours of being tagged, and also in things like waste tracking, where the cost of the tag has to be significantly lower because there's limited value to those items. But all of those applications require huge scale and relatively low cost, and that's what we enable with our Flex IC-based NFC tags. And so one application of that we're working on, if we move to the next slide, is in the healthcare space. So we've worked with a company called SamplePod, and this is the one on the bottom left here. And what we're doing there is we're taking human blood samples that have been taken from patients out in the field. We're applying a label which has a tag behind it, one of our low-cost flexible tags. The flexibility of the tag is important there, and the chip, because they're being bent around relatively small sample bottles. So those blood sample is taken in the field, it's tagged immediately, and then it's put into one of these sort of turquoise containers, which is shown down the bottom. That's called a sample pod, and each one of those sample pod in turn has an RFID tag in it. So by this way, we're able to track the samples, the movement of the samples, right from the point where they're collected, right through to the testing laboratory where they're tested. Now, we started this project long before COVID kicked off, but clearly there's an increased interest in testing people, animals, and so on. And so we think this is an important market for our technology and can be for NFC as well. And that's just one of the applications in the kind of healthcare space that we're seeing. We think there's lots of potential for a lower cost NFC solution, probably used in partnership with silicon-based solutions as well. And I think that all of that drives the uptake and the customer expectations and the customer adoption of NFC that we've heard about from the previous speakers, for all those wonderful use cases that we can enable to truly enable a contactless world where we can be tapping with our mobile phones and accessing authentication information, accessing more information about the product, confirming that it's a genuine product, and so on. So I'll hand back over to Amir to talk a little bit about some of the work they've been doing, which is specific to the COVID era. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. And just building on Alistair's points, we've seen a lot of attention and demand really in the healthcare space in this year of the COVID. And building on the last session, contactless is ever growing. Bruno touched on this in the kickoff slides. And we were very proud that when we were approached to potentially start to shortlist some of our NFC tags around the COVID kits, mainly around authentication, and then basically what it meant in aggregating results, and then hopefully providing a safer environment for everyone. So right around early summer timeframe, we were approached by the FDA manufacturers of these kits, and they were looking for a tag that would be embedded as a bill of material, very similar to any of the other applications we had, but would be securely encoded with the data, the SKU data of that test kit. And we were able to achieve that, streamline it into their supply chain. And once this tag was actually in the enclosure of the FDA kits, it redirected to a HIPAA compliant platform. And because these were FDA approved, these kits had to be administered by a physician. So if somebody went in and they were tested, once that test kit was opened, they would tap the tag. First checkpoint would be the authenticity. In the second screenshot, you would see data fields basically for the physician to start to input the patient data. And then based upon these rapid test kits, which would give a result in roughly 1 hour or less, they would be able to populate the information, whether the test was a positive or a negative, and then dependent on that result, it would give care instructions to that patient. Now, in an unforeseen situation, let's say the test did come out positive, it would have the ability to self-notify everybody that patient came in contact with within 14 days, and then ask them to self-quarantine as a result of a precaution. So we were able to achieve really two things here. One was the authenticity that we've touched on, and it seems to be a theme here with NFC as a first safeguard. But the second portion of it was the experience and the pre-built data that we were able to not only provide to the patient, but also to everyone that was in contact with them as a preliminary safeguard. So we were very proud to be a part of this and roll it out. And as we're seeing more and more traction in the healthcare space, we're seeing that this specific application can be morphed into many other use cases as well. We can jump to the next slide, and I'll hand it back over.
So if we can maybe start the video. This is a video on how NFC can help the world when confronted with the COVID pandemic. Can we start a video? Yeah, great. Okay. So actually, this video gave an overview of how NFC can be leveraged now in a world that is characterized by a concern for hygiene and safety. So maybe I might want to share some numbers from my own organization, from Mastercard, how we saw how the pandemic have influenced the take-up of NFC-based payment devices. Actually, we saw that since the beginning of the pandemic, that contactless NFC payments, they've grown at a pace twice the rate of other payments. So we've seen an increase overall, but the increase in contactless was double that from other types of payments. We also went more into detail, and we did some consumer research on the attitudes and the behaviors of individual consumers. And actually, what we found out is that globally, 8 out of 10 consumers, they have used contactless NFC payments if they had access to them, and actually going up to 90% in Asia Pacific. So 9 out of 10 of the consumers living in APAC, they are using contactless payment methods. And what is very interesting to note as well is that, of course, people are now reacting because of the pandemic, but we also asked the question whether they would continue to use NFC payments once that the pandemic is over. And actually, globally and in Asia Pacific, people, they said that about 3/4 of all respondents, they said, yes, we're going to continue to use NFC payments even when the pandemic has been stopped. So I think this is a very good illustration how the current hygiene situation has given this impetus of a new and innovative technology, and that actually NFC payments are here to stay. Next slide, please. So this concludes the webinar in itself. So now we have some time left over in case anyone has a question for any one of the panelists.
I have a whole list of questions. We can go for Bruno, we can go for a couple of hours if you'd like, but I won't put everyone through that. So I'll give everyone really quickly an opportunity to ask any questions to their control panel. I don't see any yet. And one of the questions, well, let me, one of the things we always do, and just to be honest, with ourselves, we always, at these type of sessions, always talk about how great everything is and how there's so much opportunity. But I do want us to be realistic, and I think I'd ask everyone on the panel. We can kind of move through each speaker. What do you think are the biggest challenges we're going to have with kind of achieving this kind of vision that I do believe will happen? And it's really more about how long is it going to take us to get there. But what do we see are some of the bigger challenges in making all this successful? And Bruno, I'll let you MC kind of going around the room on that question.
Yeah, okay, so let me start with giving a perspective. So talking from the payments industry, actually a big challenge is always the scaling of technology. So especially in payments, because you're really looking at an installed base of literally millions of payment terminals and readers and billions of devices. Actually, it takes a while to adopt a new technology. And well, if you think about it, how long did it take for cardboard cards to be moved to plastic, to be moved to magnetic stripe technology and embossing? Then 20 years ago, we started by putting chips on these cards, and then 10 years ago we started to integrate NFC technology. So you see, if you really have this huge installed base and nearly all consumers around the world using a certain technology or a certain product, and one of the biggest challenges, how can we scale it in an efficient, time-efficient, cost-efficient way?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I just in no particular order, just in terms of how I see on the screen. So, Alistair, how would you say, what do you think are going to be some of our bigger challenges? Already, you guys are working on one of those problems, which is cost. But what would you think are some of the other opportunities for us to kind of look and explore into as to how we can accelerate kind of this future, if you will?
Yeah, great. I mean, I totally agree with Bruno. It's about scaling up quickly. So getting kind of mass market adoption of this, getting consumers comfortable with the expectation that you should be, you can be tapping products and other items, to using NFC. So the sort of technical challenges which we're working on in terms of, developing a low-cost chip and then working with our inlay manufacturer partners on developing lower cost inlays. And then, of course, we need to work with the converters to get those into products themselves. So that's going to take time, is to kind of get from just manufacturing the chips right through to actually getting out there in the market with the brands. We're seeing a huge amount of interest from brands, from people, particularly now that retail is kind of closing down a little bit. People are interested in connecting directly with their consumers, and this is a great way of doing that. So that's going to take some time, but we're working hard on that. I think from an NFC Forum point of view, the more that we can do to kind of publicize the technology, to articulate how consumers should be using it and encouraging people to using it, and making that a consistent experience. And I think that's what the NFC Forum does well, is making sure there's a consistent experience across every time that the consumer touches that. So, huge opportunity, but as you say, there's lots of little challenges along the way, and together we can overcome those.
All right, cool. How about you, Michael?
I think there's a couple of different aspects to the challenges. I mean, the one point about a consistent experience, should I tap the front of a bottle, the back of a bottle? Where is the call to action, and how do I know where to tap? I think that world is going to go to a world that I think is around, hey, look, if I see a brand's logo, I should be able to interact with that logo. If I can't interact with that logo, I should move on. And I think, that's sort of where we look at. There are obviously challenges also that Alistair sort of mentioned here around, how do you get it on product at scale? Because when you think about the trillions of consumer goods out there, those pieces of it. I truly believe there's never been a better time than right now to start that journey, because ultimately it's about the data that you can collect, and the organizations that start right now with collecting that data. The other challenge is, where do we start? Do we start on the consumer engagement side? Do we start on the supply chain side? I think organizations have different, maturity levels and can start differently. I'm a strong believer is that if you get the consumer interaction, start building the consumer journey side today, which is relatively simple. It could be on shelf talkers, it could be on hanging tags, it could be directly on the product. There's so many different form factors that there's no excuse not to begin very simply today.
Great. And how about you, David? What do you think are the main challenges to kind of getting us? We're going to get to the future. It's just a matter of how quickly or slowly we get there. So, what do you think are some of those challenges?
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with everyone that I think the two biggest ones are just getting that engagement, getting the awareness out there, and also cost. But I think for a while we had a sort of chicken and egg problem of brands didn't necessarily want to start incorporating these experiences and these interactions or these enablements without knowing that they could get the engagement, and then vice versa. Consumers didn't have anything to engage with, so that wasn't growing either. I think that's changed. I think to Michael's point, I think we're at a very good place right now. We saw some of the numbers in the previous session, and I think between payments really just bumping the awareness, and then with that, and then kind of with the pandemic and the contactless awareness there, I do think that we're at a great spot now to see that. To your point, Mike, we knew that it was growing. I think we're seeing that really starting to take off right now. So I think we're in a great spot.
All right, and Amir, real quick, how would you like to? What are the things that you worry about that could slow us down?
Yeah, well, I think the team here summarized it, so it's always easier going last. But
well, I'm going to let you go first on the next question.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, but I think from what we're seeing from the Avery Smart Track standpoint is the volumes are getting bigger, which is really exciting because it shows from one fold that the technology is being adopted, and secondly that people are trusting it more and more. The line of sight with traditional QR is becoming an issue when you get to scale and in certain scenarios, and people, if they can tap, they can engage, and they can convert to payment, it becomes much more fluid. From our standpoint, we would classify it, and Alistair and Michael hit this spot on, is into two buckets. It's really the supply chain side and the marketing side, which drives the digital experience. And what we're seeing is the closer we get to the converter leverage business, the more successful we are in higher volumes. And by this, I mean for us to couple the tags into labels, into any kind of packaging at a high volume and pre-encode those tags, we have much more scale. And then at the same time, you can then divert digital experience from the platform. And then that's really where the power comes in with Michael's team, with David's teams, to really not only make it a dynamic experience, but make it an ongoing experience that the consumer can continuously interact with. So two buckets, but I think they're equally as important as we get into the volume game.
Right. So I'm going to flip this around, and some of you've kind of already mentioned this, so this question may not take us as long to get through, but so I talked quickly ask about what do you think are the challenges. And so my next question would be what's the one thing, Amir, that makes you optimistic that things are going to go even faster than you would forecast?
Well, I think the theme of COVID is really the driver right now, is that people don't want to even put their credit card into devices and pull it out because they don't know what was in there before. And the feedback that we're getting from a lot of the merchant services right now is that same exact theme, that COVID is accelerating the adoption here behind the technology itself. But on top of that, I really would say that the adaptation to streamlining, let's say, on top of a standard marketing experience, let's say if you take a Google Analytics and you bring it into play, that's been great for marketing teams, and it may bring them back to the investment they're putting towards email campaigns through Google Ads and things like that. But it doesn't take them down to device level data. And with NFC, you're able to get that. You're able to do the data mining. And then if somebody registers that device and registers it to a CRM contact, there's a world of power that you can get into knowing who they are, what they engage with, and then equally what kind of stakeholder they are to the brand. Who do they share that information with? And then from there, you just basically get the ball rolling with the incentives and different things. So I see that as one of the biggest drivers right now with where we're going.
Yeah, and now I think that well, I'm going to go to David next, but I do think, COVID and kind of how retail has been changing, I do think a lot of brands want to find better ways to connect directly with their customers, and this is kind of a really incredible way that could actually be enabled. Just kind of taking advantage of the trends. So David, I'm sure that was your answer. But I'm going to call you next. I didn't mean to take it from you, but what keeps you optimistic? Because this is going to take time. This is not an overnight, kind of a task, if you will.
Sure, exactly, and that kind of is my answer. But one of the things that we're seeing and are very excited about is not only, and this was happening. This isn't by any means only a result of the pandemic. We were seeing this before in kind of our internal numbers of not only are the engagements going up, just as far as or the interactions themselves, but the interactions with each individual NFC tag, so therefore in each individual product, that's also going up actually at a higher rate, telling us that not only are consumers getting more comfortable and getting more used to interacting, they're also coming back to interact again. And so again, that goes to that direct communications channel, that goes to that just opening up e-commerce directly through the products. It opens up any number of things that that we talked about earlier. I think that's where the exciting part is. We're seeing once consumers know that this is here, they really want to go back to it. And to Amir's point, that enables gives even better data. You can actually look at how the products are being used in real time as customers come back to it.
Cool. All right, Michael, what would be what's your greatest source of optimism?
Well, the fact that everybody here is sort of talking about a software platform that really gains insight into what happens when people tap. I think there's a huge lesson that Bruno has gathered so much data on, that people will tap, right? And so what I see happening is payments is really sort of driving a brand new gesture. It used to be pinch to zoom and double tap and all that. Now it's going to become this. And I think that aspect of it really kind of goes through the ability to expose information around the data. So when I tap, yes, I get to create that personalized journey that both Amir and David have talked about. And I get to find out who you are and create that engagement towards brand loyalty. But at the same time, that single tap does something I call the digital customer audit, which exposes information on your supply chain. I now know where a product has ended up, and I can trace the journey on how it got there. And when you do that, you can do things like product diversion, gray market diversion, and even get to sort of the holy grail of supply chain, which is real-time forecasting. And and it also is beyond that into the future around recycling. Yeah,
that's something we are going to have to talk about at some point, at least for some of the marketplace. Also, how about you? What's making you the most optimistic?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, quite frankly, it's the amount of interest that we're having started to talk about our NFC product. For all the reasons that the rest of the panelists have articulated, I think there's lots of different use cases. Mike, you mentioned briefly the recycling. You know, we've seen a huge interest in using NFC to provide more information to consumers about how to recycle packaging, and how and also controlling how the packaging is recycled. So smart bins, for example, that kind of route the packaging to different buckets based on what it's made of. So lots of work still to be done there for us as a community. But for me, frankly, what makes me optimistic is that every week someone comes to us with new potential applications, new ideas that we hadn't even thought about. So it's not up to us to kind of come up with all the applications for this. There are great ideas out there, and once this starts to be adopted and be used by the large brands, it will not just be consumer engagement. It's everything from stock control and kind of keeping track of when things were manufactured and what ingredients they've got in there, right through to end of life. What do we do with the packaging? How do we help reduce plastics waste? So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and that's why I'm optimistic.
Right. And Bruno, what's making you optimistic today about NFC and packaging?
Well, again, I think if you just look at the numbers that have been coming through since the beginning of the pandemic, I think, well, that has really kickstarted the adoption and the scaling, as I mentioned before, of the technology. But what is more important is that we actually, NFC is not only about hygiene and safety, which are now the main drivers during the pandemic, but it's also about frictionless interaction, because Mike, you pointed it out, it doesn't get simpler than just tapping your phone or whatever other device against the reader. It's like the bare bones of interaction between devices. So it's not only about the hygiene; it's also about taking the friction out of the equation of interacting with consumers. It makes also the whole ecosystem more robust, because you don't have this physical friction anymore between devices. Again, referring to payment cards that had a deterioration over time, because there was always this physical friction between readers and the plastic of the cards. So I think NFC in itself has inherent benefits that will continue the adoption of technology even when the whole pandemic is over.
Yeah. We are running almost out of time, but I do want to ask one question, and you can answer it as self-promoting as you would like. So I'm going to give you the opportunity, or you can defer. I mean, it's up to you, of course. I always like to do the future casting question. So assume for a minute that everyone in the audience today is looking to integrate NFC into their product from a packaging point of view, for their packaging. And the question I like to ask people, okay, assume it's the end of 2022, so it's 2 years from now. What's the one thing someone did today that made sure that they were successful 2 years from now? Well, what did they do today to make sure that they were successful? They've had all the success in 2 years' time. You know, what did they do today to start that journey? Bruno, I'm going to make you go first on that one.
And again, I'll maybe, with the risk of being repetitive, but it's taking the friction of the equation, so make it as simple as possible. So I think the organization that can make this whole customer journey, this customer interaction, as easy, as simple, as straightforward, as frictionless as possible, that will be the winner of tomorrow.
Yeah. Asha, what should someone do that wants to be successful at this? What should they do today to make sure they're successful in 2 years?
Well, Mike, it's tempting to say come and talk to Pragmatic, but
well, I was going to say you can do that. I said that's okay. That's an option.
No, but I think to Bruno's point, it's about making it seamless. So, I mean, technology for technology's sake has never been successful. It's about making the customer or whoever you're trying to interact with this, making it worth their while. What's in it for them? So having really compelling use cases that drive the use of the technology rather than just technology for its own sake. So whether that be in authentication or recycling or, you know, consumer engagement with some kind of rewards for the customer, make it really exciting for the end customer and talk to Pragmatic.
There you go. Michael.
I think two things. One thing is, you know, the realization that you really sort of need an open platform. You need a platform that allows you to get and source tags from anybody. It allows you to work with your system integrators so you can integrate into your back-end system. So having this open platform that really acts as an open ecosystem is, to me, really, really an important component. Obviously, that's what TapWow does. The second thing that I would say that I said earlier is you got to get started. And that journey needs to start now, and there's no reason why you can't start that journey today.
Great. David?
Yeah, completely agree that it's getting started now, if not yesterday, and also looking toward building the long-term relationship. You know, I think this is changing now, but particularly not too long ago, we were seeing some of the features as a little bit novel, and you know, you're just kind of looking at one thing, whether it be authentication or whatever it may be. It's not that. This is a wide, there's a wide variety that can be done here, and it should be set up that way to create that, as we've talked about before, long-term engagement, long-term brand loyalty. That's where the real value to the consumer is going to be found.
Yeah, I have, you know, I just want to add, you know, I've been in the technology industry for decades, and it is remarkable to me how frequently early movers in a market can actually change the dynamic of that market and enhance their position. So moving quickly and getting started, even with some early experimentation, does give a brand a head start as new categories and use cases become, you know, mainstream. You're now the known player. You're not trying to play catch up because you don't want to be in that position, obviously. Amir.
Yeah, again, the job is really easy here, going last after everyone. But the I would really say the agility to start now and start working out the quirks is most important than anything. I think what we see a lot in the engagements is this walk before you run methodology. So starting with a pilot, start with a 90-day small run, get that small production of tags into your supply chain, start to figure out where the bottlenecks are, how to streamline throughput, and then equally on the platform side, start to put KPIs and start to put a justification on what the data points would look like, so you can start to receive an ROI in that first 90 days, and then start to really exponentially expand on that. Otherwise, if you try to go 100,000, 500,000, millions all at once, it's really hard to identify where the nodes and the bottlenecks really are.
Yeah, and I think, and for me, the one thing I would add is also be patient. You know, I have a rule, I call it the 10-finger rule. I think it takes almost 10 years for a technology to kind of become like an idea to like whether or not it's going to be successful in the mainstream. These things do not happen overnight. And so having some patience for customers to become more aware and for the market to kind of adopt and learn about these new capabilities is always important. You know, I reflect even on my time working on Bluetooth. You know, when Bluetooth was first invented, streaming music was not even one of the use cases. And you look 10 years since, you know, that time, it took a long time for that to become, you know, one of the mainstream uses of the technology. So I'm very, very optimistic, and I cannot thank all of you more for all of your hard work and dedication to making NFC an even more adopted technology, even outside of payment. And Bruno, I'll give you some credit for payment too, so I'll let you have some of that. But you know, you kind of have paved the way, and we can learn from the experiences of the payment industry and leverage that success. I want to thank everyone for their time this morning. We are going to take a 5-minute break. The next topic, we did have our innovation awards this year. Some really exciting demonstrations of some of our winners is coming up next, starting at the top of the hour. I'd like to thank all of you for the panel conversation. All of you have a good rest of your day.